Welcome to the landing zone. I am one of your hosts. I am Mark Adam. Thank you for joining us here in the LZ. And I'm going to introduce you now to my trusty co host, Mr. Keith McKnight. How's it going over there?
Good. How are you, my man? Good to
I'm
be here. Thank you.
doing all right, doing all right. So, for those that don't know, because this is our first episode you're going to see, this is the landing zone where we talk Jets, Bombers, Valor FC, probably some Gold Eyes at some point, maybe university sport, anything to do with Winnipeg sports, basically. This is the place for we, the fans, to discuss it. So join us, chat with us, get on board. We're pretty excited to be here and do this. So let's jump right into it, sir. That Jets game last night, a little bit of a rough ending, huh?
Very rough ending. I felt really, really bad for them. They grinded away the entire game. And you saw, I don't want to sound cliche, but a lot of sportscasters say that you saw a 0-0 game once the game is tied up and heading into the third period. I really thought that they could avoid going into overtime on a winning side, and brought back a lot of, I don't want to say bad memories, but unfortunate memories with a couple of the seasons ago where the Jets had habits of picking up penalties in the late minutes and crucial moments of the game, and we saw that happen yesterday.
It seems like they don't like games being easy for themselves. They love to play that come from behind. They love to play when they're down a goal. That just seems to fuel the Jets, and it has for since they've been a team, in Winnipeg again, and that isn't sustainable hockey. But there have been seasons where they've literally made that their entire MO and been very successful, going all the way to the conference finals one year. But they love playing that underdog, come from behind. They don't like being in control of games, it seems.
You're totally right about that. It's almost like they always like being under pressure. They like to have to play with that sense of urgency. But unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't really go your way when your backs are against the wall, and they couldn't really, really dig themselves out of that hole, right? They put themselves in an unfortunate situation with putting Calgary in a power play advantage.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And
Yeah.
not probably the biggest turning point. It was the turning point.
I mean, you gotta you just gotta stay out of the box. Um,
Yes.
and I thought all the lines, because Pierre-Luc Dubois joined them, so the line shuffle was going to be awkward already, and I thought everybody played well. I thought Dubois looked like he belonged. Was that sort of your takeaway as well?
Yes, I really felt that way. Even just seeing him on the bench, he looked like he really fit in. He didn't look like he was out of place in the sense of like, okay, like how am I going to really, not disrupt the chemistry that these lines have? And it didn't look that way at all. He played a very solid game, and like you said, we got a really good player in that trade.
Absolutely, we did, and the I mean Patrick Laine, losing him, rough, because very skilled player. But I do think that once he settles into his role here, I think you'll find that Pierre-Luc Dubois is as much of a contribution to the team as Laine, or more. And I thought all four lines rolled really well last night.
I thought so too, especially injecting Pierre-Luc Dubois on the third line. You didn't see anything that was out of the ordinary. I don't want to say that they brought out the blender, because there wasn't really anything else that Coach Paul Maurice really put into the lineup or changed anything up too much, right? Other than the guys that he's already been working with. And no, I think that all of them rolled very well, and you can't really. I don't like saying it is what it is either, right? But that penalty unfortunately was really it for them.
Every single forward player played 10 minutes or more, and that's great balance, really, when you think about it. That's not typical for fourth liners to be getting 10 minutes. But as we've discussed, you and I, before, the Jets have the depth that the fourth line isn't really a fourth line. If you were to look at it in classic terms, they're not those
No.
grinders out there trying to start fights and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, yeah. It's different when you look at the Jets versus other teams, because they have they're coming at it from a different strategy. Like, they've got four very dangerous lines all the time.
You were mentioning this when we were talking the other day, and to complement what you were saying, you mentioned that the fourth line isn't chasing the game.
Yeah, that was one thing I noticed last night. Like none of the lines were chasing the game any more than the others. The whole team was chasing the game at a couple points there last night, and then like you pointed out, that late penalty really. And it was funny because while we were watching, you actually said, "Watch, the Jets are going to take a penalty," and sure enough, like a minute later, there it is, and it's becoming problematic that that sort of thing is so predictable. They're they're uncomfortable being tied or ahead in the third period. If they're not playing from behind, it's almost like, there's no urgency, there's no
No.
pressure, and they just play a little more relaxed, and it doesn't seem to be as effective for them. So how can they, or what should they do to change that going forward?
Well, I just think that, I think everybody needs to take a page out of Connor's book, because it doesn't really matter what moments in the game it is. He's always flying up and down the ice. And then you see that type of play as well with Nikolai Ehlers. He had a solid game yesterday, put the Jets up early on the board there with that solid shot from the wing there. So I think that, it's those types of guys that, they have to focus on a little bit, right? Because those are the guys that are coming out with a little jump in their step.
Yeah, they got the younger guys. You got some experienced fellas trying to teach these young guys, but right now, like there's all this talk about Wheeler. Is he the leader that we need, and da 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 da. And like, what are your thoughts on Wheeler? Like, be completely honest. Go ahead. Let me know what you think
I
about Wheeler.
I like the guy. I'm a fan, and I'm definitely with the support that Paul Maurice was giving him and sticking up for him against the media. We were talking, like you said, we mentioned this the other day as well, that there's a lot of pressure on Blake Wheeler to be a captain, right? Like, he doesn't necessarily always have to focus on being statistically the best numerical performance. You know what I mean? He doesn't always need to be the stats leader. He has to lead these guys in so many other ways, right? He's got to lead them on the road. Like, he's got to lead them in the weight room. He's got to lead them at training sessions and all those types of things. And especially in the locker room, if, like, he wants to make sure that he's connecting well with all those guys on completely different levels. So, to alleviate some of that pressure, I think other guys are just going to have to step up and start putting the puck in the back of the net for this guy.
I agree. I think 5-on-5, Wheeler hasn't had the best season so far, but all players, strong, weak, whatever, everyone goes through that, and we've never seen it from Wheeler. So he's just, like when teenagers, they have the rebellious phase later in life instead of as teenagers every so
Yeah.
often. That feels like what Wheeler is. Like, you expected his like slump, or that everybody gets that monkey on their back at some point, and Wheeler, it took this long for it to sort of catch up to him. He's just such a workhorse that maybe he's had this monkey on his back forever, but we haven't seen it manifest until now. And the stress of COVID, the late season start, 56 game season, so every game counts way more than before. Playing against all Canadian teams where you're seeing the same players, all like the grind of that, the number of back to backs they have this year to make up for how short the season is and how they had to start so late and all that. Like that really puts a lot of pressure on a guy to get the job done when he doesn't necessarily need that much pressure. He's always feeling that, I feel.
Consistently. I feel the exact same way for him. There's a lot of pressure as a captain. And my thing with it, like, I'll say it again, it's like, why does he have to worry about being statistically the best performer and then have to be the captain as well? Like, the Jets have a solid team. Like we just mentioned, that like there's a lot of strength here down to the fourth line. There's a lot of guys here that can play very, very good hockey and give him the support that he needs. And I hope it really comes out for him, because he's really poured his heart and soul out into this team, this franchise, and as well the city. You could tell that he's always wanted to be here. Like, when he was up for that contract extension for a few more years, he didn't explore free agency. Like, he was like, no, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to play. And all the power to him.
And that's also the mark of a leader too, where he didn't put any doubt into his loyalty for the club, and because he did that, he can ask that of all of his teammates. He can turn around and say, "Listen, I am here. I am 100% part of this club, be with me, be present, and just, we're going to have some success here as long as we all buy in. And he has bought in since Thrasher days, to be honest. Before
Yeah.
Winnipeg was even a thing, he bought into the system here for this franchise. He's been the Iron Man for them, playing, I forget the number of games. I remember a couple of years ago I wrote an article about his 500th game without missing one.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous statistic. That literally goes back to when they were the Thrashers still. That's how long he's gone. And I think he's missed a couple of games since with injuries, but they're very few and far between, and he is the brick and mortar of that team. And so when there is any question of him, you're questioning the whole team. You're questioning Paul Maurice at that point. You're questioning everything if you're questioning Blake Wheeler.
Yes, I agree, because he's almost like a representation of the coaching staff as well on the ice, right? That's the guy that they put all of the trust, right, and all the faith in, when has to lead, like I said, lead this team out. So yeah, no, I agree. You're questioning the team, the unit, and I don't think that's fair at all to the guy. No, not at all. And like you said, buy in, right? Like he wants everybody here. He wants everybody to just like, look, man, like this is what we're doing here. Everybody sell out and let's do this way. And we, like you said, they're going to have some success here. But goes without saying right now, without having I think it's almost like a good thing for the Jets right now having a short season, because you don't have that American Thanksgiving timeline to predict based upon the records, because by then you can kind of tell who's really going to make it to the playoffs by then.
Yeah, now it's sort of a free-for-all mad dash to the finish line right from the get-go. You're turning what was kind of a longer distance race into a sprint, and it's kind of interesting to see that dynamic play out and see what that means for different teams and different players and all that. So I'm interested. On that point, I mentioned it to you last night while we were talking. I really think, and I have for a while, the NHL should adopt a 3 points every game system. So soccer, when you watch soccer, every win is worth 3. A draw is worth 1 apiece. And they don't have a shootout system in soccer. So in hockey, I would love to see the NHL adopt 3 points every game, where winner takes 3.
Okay.
And then if you make it to overtime, both teams get 1 and you play for that 3rd point. So you're always giving away 3 points a game. And I know that a lot of people are going to jump on my back and say, well, that's going to render every record ever obsolete. But think of it like moving forward you have to give something up. There has to be a give and take. And I think progress means allowing that sort of thing to happen. What are your thoughts on the possibility of maybe running a 3 point per game season with the NHL?
I'm all for it. I think that would be really good. I think it would put a lot more pressure on people to play a little bit harder, because if you can put yourself, if you're the one who walks away with all the 3 points, right, you're really separating yourself from your opponent, right? Because they have to play a lot of catch up at that point, because in order to get a win, and if you get 3 points, that adds up very quickly, because by the time it boils down to the end of the season, they look and see who has the most points. So a lot of teams could break 100 a little bit faster.
I agree. I think there's a way. I mean, forget the 100 points though. That's the thing that's going to get people is now every team's going to have 100 points or more. That's going to change everything, right? Because now, like, if you win every game you play, that's 164 points. 82 games a year.
Yeah,
right?
that's math. Yeah.
So if you won every game on the 3 points, then you're looking at sorry, I'm just trying to do the math again. 252 points or something like that. Anyway, a lot of points. So I get that really changes the way that people look at the statistics, but you'll still be able to go like, pre 3 point era, right? Like there's all this like, in the original 6 era, in the pre-expansion era, in the this, in the that, right? There's always going to be changes and caveats made for different statistics. Like
Yeah.
I grew up a Habs fan, kid from Nova Scotia. I grew up a Habs fan, and P.S. I always really liked the Jets. Just so
Okay.
before I
Yeah.
get jumped on over here, uh, and now that I live in Winnipeg, I follow the Jets quite closely. And but I mean, growing up, I was always super excited that we could say Montreal Canadiens 24. Because when I was 10 or so, we won. Montreal won another cup, and it was their 24th, and it was such a big deal. And there's no sports franchise in the world with as many titles or whatever, and
Yeah.
that's insane. But you have to remember too that back in the day, in the original 6 era, there were literally 6 teams. So Montreal won it a bunch of times in that time, where it was basically Toronto and Montreal trading back and forth. So it's not the same, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I just that's sort of my take on it. Where you just need to look at it as put a pin in the era before. This is now the 3-point era.
Yeah, it's like a new thing now. Let's just move on from that simple, like something new. It's like when I don't like, hold that thought. It's like when they when they brought in back overtime losses, right? Remember before that for a couple of years, they just had the wins and losses record.
That was
so then
exactly
we had
my point, yes.
Yes, okay, I see where you're going with it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So before that, there were literally 2 points a game. You either won, or you lost, or you tied.
Simple as
that.
That
was it. And they decided draws were boring, so they introduced that overtime shootout, like somebody has to win situation. So now we have 3 points being given out every game through that. So how do we get to that point now?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like you said, put a pin in it, and it's just time to really like look at the statistics differently now. Like you said, it's time to just look at it differently.
And it's not like people aren't on the internet aren't going to be like, if this was the pre 3-point era, they would have broken 100 points. People are going to do that all the time. People do that with all the other stats, same as the overtimes and the wins and stuff. When you talk about like teams tying games, people still talk about like if the overtimes weren't giving away that free point, what a difference that would make. That ever important third point. Well, guess what? Give 3 points for every game and make every game that much more important.
That much more important. Yeah, because you're playing for something. You're playing for one more thing now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I really think it's important to make every game count, and I don't know any better way than making each game worth 3 points total, and then 3 points are given out regardless of what happens. Am I crazy?
Whatever stage the game goes, exactly. You're right, exactly. So, like you said, it's going to put people. It can really separate teams a little bit faster too. Like if you're not winning, like you're going to fall behind very quickly.
But it'll be a lot easier for those teams in the back to catch up with just a couple of wins. So
exactly.
The teams in the front have to keep winning. Like it makes winning a lot more important every single game. Even if you lose the last 4 games, that's 12 points you're losing now instead of 8. But that means that it only takes you 4 games to get those 12 points back instead of 8 points. That's my argument for it. That's why I would argue for it.
Exactly. That explanation there is really going to help the viewers understand. It's like, like instead of people coming at your back there, that point alone there, just be dealing with that math equation really puts it into perspective.
I agree. I think you can't have progress without sacrificing something, and I think that's an easy call to make, because I think it's going to make games more exciting for the players. It's going to make games more exciting for the fans. It's going to I think that would change a lot of things, and I don't know how seriously it's ever been considered by the NHL. I know it's been brought up before, and I think it's been pretty quickly dismissed, and I think it's basically by the historians that love, here's the records that we keep, and here's how we keep them, and it would mess with, our dynamic to change that now. So that's sort
Yeah.
of where that sort of comes from. But
Yeah,
what do I
with
know?
the league that's been in business for 103 years, I don't think that's a bad thing to look at.
Fair, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, the NHL's been around for a very long time, and like the history of it is never going to go away.
no.
There and like for Christmas, I think in 2000, my parents bought me the Encyclopedia of Hockey, and it's like this thick and this big and a tiny little print like an encyclopedia, and there's an entire section that's pre-expansion. Poof, done. Like those are just statistics from pre-expansion, and then there's this giant section of post-expansion stats, and there's all these little stars and asterisks and caveats depending on what had happened that year and da da da. This year was a lockout. This year da da da. So we're already dealing with this year. Teams aren't going to hit 100 points.
No.
So does that break streaks for teams? Do you know what I mean? Like a teams that are used to hitting X number of points every year, then it's like they've hit this many points every year. Asterisks.
Yeah, there's always going to be an asterisk next to it. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think it isn't as big a deal to make that change as people will argue. So, but that's all the thoughts I have on that at the moment. Let's quickly touch on Laine. He got benched the other day.
I saw that, and when I read the first headline, it's just like, oh, he just got benched. And I started to look more at it. There was not really much to do with it. Then apparently, I can't remember which Columbus Blue Jacket actually quoted it, but he says, sometimes if Torch sees you, you just have this face like you don't want to be there, you're not anarchy, he'll bench you. And he also said I was that guy many times as well. So I don't know, maybe Laine just had this look on his face, or do you think, now it's just crossed my mind, do you think it has anything to do with Laine saying that it was a joke about him not getting his own PlayStation 4 or 5 skin? I saw that on social media, and then I don't know if maybe Torts found out about that, saw it somewhere, and then he was just like, hey, why are you worried about that? Like, let's just worry about the game of hockey here,
Maybe, I mean, that could be a contributing factor because the way Torts works is if you're not giving me 100%, you may as well give me nothing. And so he literally just take 26 minutes off, game's over for you, have a seat.
Literally.
But that sends a huge message. And there's been lots of coaches, and it's funny because when you hear about something like that happening, you usually hear like the media asking teammates and stuff about it. The interviews that I saw, they were asking everyone. They're asking coaches of other teams, like the Ottawa Senators. They're asking players from Toronto and like all these different clubs and players who have played with Torts before, or coached with Torts and all this stuff. So the media made it a John Tortorella issue, which I don't know if I 100% agree with, but that's how the media works. They latch onto what they want, and that's what they get. But I don't know. I thought it was neat to see the perspective of a lot of different people from a bunch of different organizations who have all had interactions with Tortorella, who all essentially, I mean, when you break it down, they all sort of defended Tortorella's actions because they're all like, well, Torts has his reasons.
Yeah.
Let's just leave it at that. He doesn't do anything without a reason, and if he's benching you, it isn't just you missed a check. It's there's a series of things he sees very easily when people aren't giving that 100% we discussed, and I'd like to see more from you. So
yeah, he's a highly demanding coach, right? And it shows that. And anything with Coach Tortorella, it's a hot ticket for anything or anyone. You always want to pay attention to that because it's always going to be interesting. Always.
Yeah, he's sort of a media magnet. And I heard somebody saying, like, what about the negative thing, like the negative attention that Tortorella brings on this? I'm like, is that negative attention? Like, he answered your questions. You asked him, like, why did you, was it because he wasn't checking? I will talk to the player about that. That's between me and him. And he's got to listen to what I've got to say, and I've got to listen to him. And I was like, It seems like a very like the media sort of makes Tortorella out to be this loose cannon a lot, and I really don't feel that from him. Does
Yeah,
that make
like I know
sense?
he's had his moments, like talking back to reporters and getting aggressive and things like that. But I get what you're saying though. I don't like they really make him out to. Do they make him a scapegoat? You almost think?
I think a little bit. It's just sort of like a, oh, look what this guy did to me, this reporter. But like, if I was John Tortorella and I'm as passionate as I am and I'm doing everything I can to make my team win and the media is questioning every little thing, I feel like I would be that kind of guy to the media. I would be the like why are you asking me stupid questions? Like we all know the answer to that, move on. Or
Like yeah,
like that's just
yeah.
sort of the attitude he has and I appreciate that. That would be my style as a coach as well.
Very straightforward guy. You can't put that past him, right? He's just to the point. And I like what you said there. If you're not giving him 100%, well, don't give me anything at all. Like, why are you here?
Yeah.
And yeah, if that's the culture that's going to be cultivated in Columbus, well, Patrick, like you did not want to play here. Apparently, that's what you were quoted on and saying. So you know what? You're playing with a different coach now, and hey, you know what? Like all the best to him. And then even Roslovic's having some success down there. You don't see him getting benched.
Love
So
seeing that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he's getting the minutes in at least. Yeah, it was cool to see, that the other day when both Laine and Roslovic scored in the Columbus game, and then you got, I don't know. I love seeing Roslovic do well. I'm a fan, and I will not be cheering for him when we ever come to blows with Columbus, if we ever see Columbus again in the history of the NHL ever.
ever.
The way that the new divisions and stuff work. But I really think, I don't know. I love to see success for most players. I won't say all. There are some I wish absolute failure for. But that's more based on them as human beings than them as players. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Yes.
Yeah. So I thought Patrick was a classy guy about the whole thing. He didn't crap talk Winnipeg the city. He didn't crap talk. He kept his mouth shut until he left. And when he left, he said, "Yeah, this is the reason I wanted out, and that's it, done, no more questions." So
Yeah.
and now he's just going to work for his other team, and that's awesome, and that's good for him too, right? So I want to see that from star players, no matter where they play. You want to see that level of class. And I think we're getting that from Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic, who everybody knew was upset he wasn't getting the minutes here in Winnipeg, and he wasn't going to be a top 6 guy in Winnipeg for a long time. So
Yeah, he wanted to be up there.
absolutely he did, and he thought he deserved it, and he might deserve it. But there's the problem in Winnipeg is, as we've discussed, the depth in Winnipeg is ridiculous. You got Blake Wheeler. Is he going to play on the third line now? Is that his
Yeah.
is that his new place?
Yeah.
So if Wheeler's being moved to the third line, you can't be upset about playing on the third or fourth line in Winnipeg. You just can't.
You just can't. No.
That's a personal opinion, I suppose. But
No. Nonetheless, though, the boys, they had a tough one yesterday in Calgary. They come back here now to play not 2 nights in a row, but 2 games against, was it Ottawa, right? Ottawa's coming in. So, hopefully they can bounce back and they get some momentum, and hopefully you take 2 games there, right? That'll be good.
yeah, I agree that we should really be looking at that a little closer uh, when we go into these series. We should be really looking for how, when you're looking at one game against a team and then you're moving on to another team, you almost don't have that time to get set, to get in the right mind frame. And I think with the new way the NHL schedule looks, with all these series where you're seeing the same team over and over, you got to dive deeper into your preparation, and your lineups and your matchups matter more,
Oh, a
or
lot.
do you think
Oh,
they
they
matter
do.
less? Does it
Yeah.
matter less when you see the same team over and over again, or does it matter more?
I think it. I think it matters a little bit more because you. These are probably teams that you don't want to see in the playoffs if you're playing them so much, right? So they probably. I don't know. Every game almost seems like it almost has like a playoff mentality to it, with it being a shorter season.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know.
yeah, it's
That's a
almost like
really
the
good question.
playoffs
It's
came
been,
early. I see what you're going there. I see where you're going with
yeah,
that. But
yeah.
anyway, that's our time for today. We will be back after the next Jets game. We do want to be covering Bombers and Valor FC. Huge Valor FC fan right here.
Yes.
Love the soccer. So let's keep this going. If you have any questions, comments, whatever you want discussed on our show, uh, by all means, put your questions in the comments and we'll get back to you. Until then, check out thewpg.ca/sports, which is where this show will be home. And we will see you next week on behalf of Keith McKnight and myself. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great night.